Hey folks, welcome back to my channel, The Evil Dungeon Master here on YouTube. Hopefully you're doing well out there. Today I want to go over something that I've not done on my channel. I'm looking back at all the videos that I've done here on this channel. I have not done a video on getting started with Advanced Dungeons and Dragons, and I talk about it all the time on this channel. I do podcasts about it on this channel constantly. I was involved in the podcast for 11 years for Advanced Dungeons and Dragons, and I think we may have covered it in the beginning of that podcast, but I've never covered it here on my channel. So getting involved with Advanced Dungeons and Dragons may be a little expensive at first, but it's well worth it to get into the old school D&D as opposed to playing newer editions with people getting a little frustrated with it. I got this from a couple people that are new on my channel. They asked, Vince, you play these all the time. What books do I need to get started? Can you help me out? Certainly I could do that. And that was asked by Stephanie, that was asked by Jay, and it was asked by Tom, was his name, I believe. They all emailed me with these specific questions about what books and everything, and should they get this book, that book, was this a good price, is that a good price? So I figured I would just go over it here on the channel and take care of one video along with the write-up I was doing. So the first things first that you're going to want to buy is you're going to buy the 3 essential books. And the Player's Handbook by Gary Gygax is the most essential book you're going to want to buy to read to see if you actually like this system at all. It's a lot different than playing the D20 system that you're used to now in 3rd edition going forward. That was all easily done with math and everything, and the way it was written, it wasn't so complex. Now, these books are written in, as most people say, high Gygaxian, so you have to get used to that. When you read these books, first you're going to take a little bit of a step back, and you're going to be like, and then you're going to read it again, and then you're going to read it again. So what you're going to do after buying this book is you're going to want to get the Dungeon Master's Guide. That's probably the next thing in your books collection you want to get. The Dungeon Master's Guide answers a lot of questions that the Player's Handbook kind of leaves open, and it also has a lot of information that you need to play the game. For instance, in the Player's Handbook, it goes through character creation, equipment, and things like that, and how spells work and stuff like that, but it doesn't exactly tell you a lot about combat. Like, what does it take your character to hit? What does this mean? What does that mean? And that's when the Dungeon Master's Guide comes to fruition here for you. You read that, it'll give you all that stuff, because when this was, you have to remember, back in the 80s, when these things were all made, there was this hard line between dungeon masters and players, where the dungeon master had all the information. The players would just rely on the dungeon master for most things, and only supposed to have a player's handbook on the table, nothing else. They weren't supposed to have a monster manual or this book at all. I remember a bunch of times we were playing with in the park with Joe back in the 80s, the great Joe DM. He would not let us look at the Dungeon Master's Guide, and now he wasn't the only one like that. There were quite a few people during that time frame that did the same exact thing when it came to running these games. When you're sitting at the table, the players will only have a player's handbook, and they should not be flipping through a monster manual or a DM's guide unless the DM gives it to them, and that's fine. So you're going to want to read both these books back to back. Maybe take a break in between, of course, and take notes. Take notes. Take a notepad, jot down little things, get little post-it stickies like these, and put it in the book, and put down important things that you need for later on. You have note cards that you can take down certain information. I got these big ones like this. When I'm learning things, I'll put it on there, or I'll put it onto Cornell notes. I have a whole bunch of these written up, or printed up, I should say, Cornell notes, where I take down notes for things. I've been using it for my solo play. Here's one of the things I just recently did for AD&D. Starting out a new solo play for that, which I don't know if I'm going to put it out there or not. But anyway, once you're done with that, you're also want to get the Monster Manual 1st edition. This is very important. Without this, there's really no game. This will give the Dungeon Master all the monsters that you need to play this game. So you're going to want to look for this book. Now, all 3 of these books can be purchased at Drive-Thru-RPG at a reasonable price as a PDF. It's the newer cover ones, and we'll look at that in just a minute, and I'll show you what I mean by the newer covers. They did some reprint covers for you. I don't know if they did a print on demand. We can double check that in just a second. But you need these 3 core books to read them as your solid foundation for playing this game. As you get a little more experienced in this game, there's a couple other books that I can recommend. And that's the Monster Manual 2, which expands upon the monsters that you have and give you a little of a variation for your games. So it's another good book to have. You don't have to read monster manuals cover to cover. You just need to read it in chunks as you need it and use it. I wouldn't suggest reading the cover to cover unless you really want to, but I mean, that's your prerogative. Now, when you get further along, you're going to want one of probably the best ones is the Fiend Folio, which was, I believe, out of TSR UK's magazines for Dragon, I think, or something. It came from the UK. These are all these weird, creepy creatures that you can think of where you got in here, and they're beautiful for your campaign. I can't tell you how many hours of fun this Fiend Folio gave for me. I suggest picking it up if you can, if you want to keep expanding. One last book that I definitely think that you should pick up, and it's up to you if you want to expand your game a little bit more and have a little more options, but it does add a little overpowered stuff to your game. So tread lightly when you do it, but that is the Unearthed Arcana book, which has like Cavalier and things like in it, and it has a lot more spells that you can use and more ways to roll up characters, more sub races for like the elf and the dwarf and things like that. It's something that you want to look into getting eventually. I've always thought of Unearthed Arcana as Gary's like notebook, his personal notebook of house rules and stuff that he wanted to put inside, but he didn't exactly put into the game because of whatever reason he did and put it into the game. And when TSR needed a little more cash, here comes this book. So you have to remember that. After you get done reading all these books and you're done and you're confident, go to your player's handbook and go through the character creation process. You want to focus on how a character is made. You're going to want to look at rolling characters up, what methods there are for rolling characters up, and you want to focus on the attributes at first and how those kind of work. And they go through explaining it in the player's handbook. And each attribute, much like other editions, do have some little things that go with it. When it comes to AD&D, there's quite a bit of information when it comes to attributes and their ability scores. So the higher the attribute, obviously, the more you get out of that ability. And then you go through the tables and it'll tell you how to do things. Make sure to read everything and don't skip over it. It'll reference the Dungeon Master's Guide at certain points as well. So you may have to flip into that and look into those sections too. Also, you have to remember that with earlier editions, there were restrictions on some of the classes. You had to have certain ability scores or attributes scores to actually qualify for a class. It wasn't you pick your class, you pick your race, and then you play. It was you roll up your attributes, see what you qualify for, pick your race and your class. For example, there was a minimum for certain classes that you had to have. And as we're scrolling through this, well, here's the class limitations for a certain racial stock of characters. There are certain classes, there are certain races that just can't be a certain class whatsoever. Like a cleric cannot be a dwarf. A cleric cannot be an elf. You could be a half elf, halfling, no, half orc, yes, and human, yes. Can they be druids? Only thing that can be druids are half elven and humans. So you're going to want to go through this, and there's a little chart on the bottom that talks about how they qualify and why they qualify. The cleric class for dwarf actually does mention that, where is it? There is a cleric can only be true neutral subject class. Yeah, there is a possibility of a dwarf being an NPC cleric, and that's about it. When you get into the Unearthed Arcana, it lifts a lot of these restrictions and allows you to play the classes as you want. So you're going to want to get into this, start making your character, learn the process of how to roll the dice and the rolling methods that Gary provides in the book, and try to do as he explains. Or you could start making up how you want to do it. I wouldn't suggest that at first. We should worry about that later on. There were also restrictions on how far demi-humans, which would be everything but a human, can go level-wise when it comes to getting up in levels for certain classes. Like, even though we talked about dwarves, elves, and gnomes not being allowed to be a cleric, here's the example I was looking for. They can be NPCs, they just can't be player characters. But some of them, like a half elf, can only go up to level 5, a half orc level 4. Humans were unlimited. AD&D was very human centric, and Gary wanted to balance it out when it came to humans versus demi-humans, so people would still want to play humans versus not. Obviously, races do give you a penalty or a bonus depending on what race it is. And humans, they don't get anything except being human and unlimited and everything, and could be just about any class they want to be. There was also a character race, male, female cap on ability scores or attribute scores. It was said that women cannot be as strong as men. They cannot be, they can be as intelligent. They can be as charismatic. It didn't really matter. It was mostly in the strength and some of the other categories for the minimums that you can be for that actual race. So, yeah, I know I spoke about this on the Cavalier podcast I did the other day with DM Rivers, and we were talking about how the Cavalier class allows female Cavaliers. And this is one of the reasons why they pointed out that Gary was very sexist, because he was saying these things like women can only have a strength maximum of 17. Of a dwarf or an elf or a gnome is 15. Humans, he gave a base that you couldn't go past, and that was considered sexist to a lot of people. But then again, he's like saying, yeah, a knight can be a female character, which is traditionally not how it works. So take it however you want to take it. Remember, this was done in the 80s, or well, actually the late 70s, and some of these things were written. So once you get that down, write down your character, get him done. Then you're going to want to look at how combat is done, and you're going to want to flip over to the Dungeon Master's Guide, and you're going to read about combat between the Player's Handbook and the Dungeon Master's Guide, and you're going to want to run yourself through some combat. I know that sounds boring or something, but it helps you learn the game. Take your character, have them put them in a cave, design up a little cave map, or find a cave map online. Place your character. You can even do a virtual tabletop, or you sit here right in front of you on the table if you really want to. Get some minis and go to town with that. You're going to want to do a sample combat, starting with initiative and then moving forward with attacks, just to see how it works. Doing both sides, subtracting hit points when hits are occurred, looking at the chart, seeing what armor class you hit. These things will help you prepare to see how much you really like the game. Not everything in these books need to be used. There was a couple things that are in this book that I don't use personally myself, and that was the weapon modifier chart and the 2-hit. There was another chart in here. I keep forgetting what the name of it is. But there was the weapon modifiers chart and the weapon speed charts. I don't use those things at all. Not a lot of people did. It was something that they implemented in that they had to. And even Gary himself really didn't use it when he played his games later in life, because he didn't care for it, from what I've read and what he said. So I don't know. If you want to skip it, skip it. Remember, books are guidelines. They're not the final say. You're the final say as the DM. If you don't want something in the game, don't include it. It may break the game in some instances, so be ready for that. But not using weapon speed or modified weapons modifiers doesn't break the game. It doesn't make it any worse. It just makes it even easier, to be honest. Combat. When it comes to combat, you're going to probably feel a little limited, because there's not many things to do in combat except swinging your sword. So AD&D and older systems like this rely on more of a narrative-driven combat and creativity for doing things rather than complex mechanics inside the game. So describing doing things will get you more things, if you understand what I mean. If you're just like, yeah, I swing my sword and I attack, it's just like, all right, roll. But if you're like, yeah, my guy tries to jump on top of the cave wall, and as he flips off the cave wall, he wants to stab the kobold in the head. You know what? Descriptive combat like that will probably impress your dungeon master, and he'll give you a bonus. I know I do. knows that somebody's involved with the game. So once you're done with all that and you're going to be ready to play with your friends, you're going to want to make up your own campaign world. And there are plenty of tools online to do that. AD&D has a couple campaign world books that you can look at. One of them being Greyhawk, another one being Dragonlance, and I think there was a third one. I'm going blank on what it is. Forgotten Realms, but I think that was second edition. I apologize. So you can get the Dragonlance book, or you can get the Greyhawk book to start yourself off, and just to get an idea, or you could just make up your own world. Doesn't matter. You've seen plenty of videos on YouTube of people making maps, populating the world, and then making your own stories up. Once you get a little more experience with playing the game, you're probably going to want to make your own house rules just to handle certain situations. And as long as you're on the same page with all of your game playing buddies, no one's going to really care. The point of playing these games is to sit around the table and have fun. And as long as everybody's having fun, then that's the proper way to play the game. Remember, anyone can sit at the table. There's no restrictions. Anyone that makes a restriction at the table is just silly. I could see if the person's an absolute jerk or a dick and you don't want them at the table. I get it. But you shouldn't tell someone they can't sit at your table because of whatever reasons. Someone wants to play. I mean, we were so happy back in the 80s when someone's like, yeah, I want to play D&D. It was like, what? They want to play D&D. So I'm still like that. When I go to the comic book store, sit down at the table, and people will like see what I'm doing, and they're like, oh, can I play? I'm like, absolutely you can play. So there's that. That's what you need to start getting into the game. Get the core books, check out what is in there, read it cover to cover, take your notes down, do some sample combats, try to handle situations of role play with your buddies. Remember, when it comes to this game, it's a lot of narrative when compared to other games when you just like, I search, roll, I rolled a 15, what do I find? When you're searching, this game emphasizes a lot of description. That's why the 10-foot pole was in this game. The 10-foot pole was for tapping in dungeons to see if there was a trap ahead of you. Yeah, it was a pain in the butt, but that's how you did it. And when you search rooms, you actually would tell the dungeon master, I go around the room and I'm checking for things. All right, what are you checking? Oh, I'm checking the dresser drawer here in the bedroom to see if there's anything in the drawers. Anything in the drawers? Okay, well, you find. Notice there was no rolls there. When it comes to things like that, you're not going to be doing a lot of rolling. You're going to be doing a lot of narrative, descriptive, wonderful things like that. So, character development is a lot of fun as you go up in levels. It will seem like it takes forever when it comes to D&D, Advanced Dungeons and Dragons, because of the way that experience combat is handed out. So, try to come up with unique ways of handing out experience as well, so your players can level up. Each class has its own experience chart that they have to look at for leveling up. Some classes have a little less, some classes have a little bit more, depending on which one they're doing. So that's how you get started with Advanced Dungeons and Dragons. The 3 core books is all you really need to get to play this game. Now, the last thing we're going to look at, and let me go over to that, and that's going to be heading over to Drive-Thru RPG and looking for the Wizards of the Coast. And these are the reprint covers they came out with. I think it was 2012, around there, 13. They came out with these reprint covers commemorating the addition to the book, and you can pick these up as well if you can't find these other books, the original covers and second printings online. Let's just see if they do any print on demands. I forgot if they did or not. Yes, they do have print on demands. Perfect. So if you want to print them out, they're very nice looking. Perfect book to pick up. $10 for the PDF, and you can get a standard color book for about $20. There's really no color in the book, so I don't know what their color, talking about premium color for. It's just black and white. They didn't have color in these books. So you want to pick that up. Now, if all these things to you are like, nah, dude, that's just too expensive to worry about, there is one alternative that you still can do, and that's look up Osric. Osric is for free at osricrpg.com. You can pick up their book. This was the first and original clone before cloning was allowed. This book is the original clone of Advanced Dungeons and Dragons. It has everything you need to play the game, from Player's Handbook all the way to Monsters. It's 400 something pages. It's absolutely free, and it works just as good as Advanced Dungeons and Dragons. I'm a purist, so I don't use it. I'm not making fun of it or putting it down. I was always a purist, so I had these books already. So I always use Advanced Dungeons and Dragons and didn't really use Osric at all. But Osric does help quite a bit with clearing up some of the rules in the book that's confusing. And it's also not written in Gygaxian. It's written in a little bit more modern tone because it was done around the turn of 2000-ish. So it'd be easier for someone to read, especially if you not sure if you want to get into it. Go nab this, give this a good solid read, and then make your decision from there. You could totally play a campaign with this, and there's other books that they've made that go along with Osric. I think there was an update to this book as well, and then there was some other supplemental books that they came out with to help push the game forward and get more people into it as well. So you make those decisions. I gave you the ideas, you make the decisions. Hopefully this is giving you enough information to go forward when it comes to making a decision for Advanced Dungeons and Dragons. If you have any questions, hit me up here on the channel in the comments below, or ask the DM at theevildm.com. You can head over to my website, theevildm.com, to sign up for my website newsletter. So whenever I do a podcast or a project, it emails it directly to your box. You can also support me by going to buymeacoffee.com/theevildm, leave a donation there. Or you can join the YouTube channel here for 99 cents a month as a member. You get videos ahead of time, and you also get a weekly members-only stream here on the channel Friday nights just for you. So with that said, I'm going to head out. We're going to keep it original. We're going to keep it old school. Good night. God bless, and keep those AD&D fires lit. Good night, everybody.
Don't ever laugh as the hearse goes by, for you may be the next to die. They wrap you up in a big white sheet from